Craig and Karen supporting local bookstores, audiobooks, and more. Join the world of stories. As always, thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Craig, and welcome to the Libro.fm podcast, where we talk to authors, booksellers, narrators, and more.
And I'm Karen. We have a very special 3-episode arc for you coming up, and this is in honor of our 10th anniversary here at Libro.fm. We've been around for 10 years, if you can believe it.
That's ridiculous and awesome.
It's amazing.
And I hope we're here for 100 more years.
Yes.
Do you want to say why it's 3 episodes instead of only 1 like it was originally supposed to be?
Oh, goodness. I would love to. So we interviewed 3 amazing people that own and work in bookstores. And while we initially intended to speak to all of them for 15 minutes and create 1 episode with excerpts from these conversations, couldn't be done. These are the coolest people ever. And we wanted you to hear all about what they're up to in their very unique independent bookshops. And so now we're doing 3 episodes because we talked to them all for at least 30 minutes.
Sorry, Libro marketing department. Yeah, so it was supposed to be 15 minutes and we just could not talk to these people enough. And after every single one, we were like, I want them to be our friends.
Well, so for this first episode, really excited. We're talking to Mairi Oliver, who owns Lighthouse Bookshop in Edinburgh, Scotland. And you're just not going to believe all of the cool things that they're up to over there.
Yes, I am obsessed with their Pay It Forward program, which we talk about on the podcast. So if that sounds interesting to you, stay tuned and stick around afterwards, and maybe we'll talk a little tiny bit about what we're reading. Nope, we won't. Never mind. I'm getting a nod. I'm getting a head shake from Karen. So don't stick around after. Go do something outside. It's really nice out.
Enjoy your summer and enjoy the interview with Mairi.
Hello, Mairi. Welcome to the podcast. For our listeners, we'd love if you could tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, Craig. Hi, Karen. My name's Mairi. I run Lighthouse, Edinburgh's radical bookshop in what is currently sunny Edinburgh. I've been a bookseller for about 15 years, and I've had the bookshop for 7 years. So this is what I do.
What drew you to this life of books, like initially?
What is not to draw one to a life of books?
Amen.
Very true.
I'm one of many that, read books under the covers with a torch and stayed up too late. Books of, they're the building blocks of me. And I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And I started down that route. And then I discovered that I did not have the emotional stamina to do human rights law. Power to the people who do it. It makes, some people are fueled by the hellfire of injustice, and it just made me really sad. And I was like, I don't want to be sad for the rest of my life. And I was lucky enough to be diverted by a friend and a boss at the time to do some stuff with books. And then I basically ran off to Australia, determined to become a bookseller. And a bookshop in Sydney's North Shore, the lovely Jay at the Constant Reader gave me my first real bookshop job. And then, it just was like, this is it. Actually, for me, wanting to get through the day, get through a life has to be about making the world a better place, or playing my part in making the world a better place. And books gave me a home to do that in a way that felt like more me than like fighting in a courtroom, or it was like, okay, this is it. This is where I dig. This is home. So, yeah.
God, that's such a good answer. I had this as potential follow-up, ask what drew. And I'm like, I'm so glad I asked now. What a beautiful answer.
Well, we're so excited that you and your team are partners with Libro.fm. I think it's only been since July of last year, so less than a year, that we went international, which is hard to believe. I'm curious, what it is about audiobooks that drew you to want to partner with us, and if you hear any interesting anecdotes from your booksellers or your customers about how they're listening to audiobooks.
I mean, I think we're a pretty neurospicy team, and I think that for a lot of people with ADHD, autism, or people with small children who will interrupt a chain of thought, which is also in our team, I think audiobooks provide something that like a print book can't. And so it means that if you're a reader and a lover of books, it gives us a chance to like still be able to do that, still be able to read. I think in a sort of ever so slightly melodramatic way, like audiobooks saved my life during the pandemic. Like when the shop closed during the first lockdown and my team went off to on furlough and everyone was locked at home and it was just me in the bookshop doing like 8-9 hours in the shop on my own and then doing like 3 hours of like walking around the city delivering books by foot to people's doorsteps. I am not meant to be alone for such lengths of time. And that's when I discovered audiobooks. And I was using the library app that we have here, the Libby app. And it was suddenly like, oh, actually, like I can listen to a book a day. I can get lost for like 12 hours in a story and not feel completely alone and divorced from the reasons that I do this. And so, yeah. And I think like Jim similarly found audiobooks during the pandemic and then as well, like with a small kid. And then suddenly it turned out that like we were all listening to them, but we weren't talking about it. Just that thing of like, I don't know, we sort of had them siloed off, audiobooks separate from books. And then as soon as Libro reached out, Jim was like, this is the thing for us. We get to talk about, you know, performance. We get to talk about the books that like are the ones you listen to rather than the ones you have in print. We get to like, and as soon as we started talking to people about it, I think partly because our demographics in our audience reflect the team quite a lot. We found that like a lot of people were like either already listening to audiobooks or, you know, were coming in and being like, you know, I'd love to read, but like with my ADHD, I find that a real struggle. And being able to be like, there's a really great audiobook of this one. Like, here's a Libro bookmark. Like, go away and listen to this. And people being like, oh, I can do that. So yeah, we found that like there's a special, you know, like in any other bit of the book world where we all have like our little area that is our passion. And then suddenly you find other people who are like the romance readers or the sci-fi readers or the audiobook listeners and
Yeah.
little subgenre nerddom. And yeah, it's really nice being able to like find those people and be like, yeah, you can talk about audiobooks here. It's like, it's not sacrilegious to do that in a bookshop. Also, you can buy your books from us.
It's a win-win all around. I love what you said about the accessibility of it. Every time we get any kind of feedback through our channels that, you know, I have XYZ, you know, autism, whatever, and you know, I just discovered your company and now I can like enjoy books again. It's like the best feeling. So
yeah, and I have like my a friend of mine has got long COVID, and she's a writer. She has like a whole world built on books, and is like now unable to read. And audiobooks have been this lifeline for her, where it's just like, okay, I can still be in this world that has always been my comfort. That was kind of taken away when she wasn't suddenly no longer able to like hold a book up, let alone like focus. So no, they were a gift for readers, I think.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
yeah. I've seen Lighthouse described as an unapologetically activist radical bookshop. And I was wondering if you could tell us more about what that means and what Lighthouse's mission is and like what sets it apart from other, you know, maybe more standard bookstores.
So we're part of a broader tradition of like radical bookshops. And in the UK, there's an alliance of radical booksellers, which includes like some amazing bookshops like Five Leaves in Nottingham, the feminist bookshop in Brighton, Houseman's, that's been going since like 1945. So there is this tradition of like radical bookselling, which is about marrying like your values to your business and sort of saying, you know, it matters to me the books that I sell. It matters to me how I contribute to the economy. So a writer whose ideas damage the world, whose platform is about hate, I don't want to be part of the economy that makes them a living off sharing those ideas. So I'm just not going to sell their books. Or conversely, I think we need more queer writers, more feminist writers, more writers of color, more people who are writing their own stories, histories in own voices. And the radical tradition in radical bookshops is about doing that. Like, queer books are far more accessible now than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. The shop here used to be called Word Power. It was opened in 1994. And before Word Power, Edinburgh had 3 radical bookshops: Women's Zone, which was a feminist bookshop run by volunteers; First of May, which was a workers' bookshop; and Lavender Menace, which was an LGBT bookshop. And when those all folded in the 80s, early 90s, Word Power came up, having it under one roof. And that's the shop that I took over and have turned into Lighthouse. And so it's partly that, just like how we run a bookshop, how we run a business. The activist side of it is that we think a better world is possible and worth fighting for. And that, like I was saying before, it's like we all dig where we are, and books are the way we choose to fight that fight, whether that's giving people like the knowledge and the experience to be able to fight certain fights, to understand like environmental justice, to be able to understand what ecological collapse is, to then be able to do something about it, or, arming people in different ways. We can weather the storms out there better if we see ourselves represented and celebrated and valued. And so being able to read and access books that do that for you, so that you're shored up for the other fights. So that means that we kind of go out to places to get those books into the right hands. We march at Pride. We're part of organizing groups for various campaigns. We've supported fossil-free books, which is a big campaign in the UK to try and create a fossil-free books industry. So we kind of, it's about walking the walk in like every little bit of the way we're doing it. We're a living wage employer. We want to give like jobs that are dignified and joyful and allow our booksellers to be more than just living on the breadline. It's kind of about that.
I'm gonna cry. It's like amazing. I wanted to go to this bookstore now.
I'm like, Mairi, are you hiring by any chance? Don't tell my boss I said that.
Do you need the podcasters?
I think I saw that your Lighthouse journey started in 2017, and obviously so much has happened since 2017. We already mentioned COVID is one of those things, and I'm curious, if your vision or kind of what you expected this to look like has changed along the way, and how you've kind of adapted from 2017 to now.
Yeah, definitely. We have a lot more books than we used to. It's taken a while to get us to the stock levels. So just the experience of the space is different. In terms of a vision, I mean, I'm not the person that took over the shop in 2017. You kind of find this with third spaces, whether that's like bookshops. I think queer bookshops are a particular experience of that. But other kinds of community spaces, the feedback loop is really strong, where if you build something to shore up people, you find that it shores you up. I'm gayer than I was 7 years ago. I value and understand the value of like mental health and well-being in ways that I didn't before. I used to work every hour, 7-day weeks and never take a holiday. And it was always go, go, go. And it took a long time to be like, actually, if I want to dismantle capitalism the way that it oppresses people, I have to start here. Moving our full-timers to like 4-day work weeks. Like the shop has kind of just evolved in little ways to reflect exist as this expression of like what we believe in. So I think just in some of the mechanics, it's a different place. I think we're a lot less apologetic about some things. Like, we can be bold. We know what we believe in. We're a bigger team, so our ideas are tested out on each other. I have 3 writers who work for me, who are, Mohammed Tansi, Jessica Tanyahanesen, Christina Neuvert. Like, they're writing these things. They're having these ideas. They're in these spaces in a different way than just booksellers. And I think that's meant that we can be more unapologetic about the stances that we're taking because we know why we're doing it. And that also means that people know what we're about more. So we waste a lot less time arguing with, transphobic people because they just don't come here. And we waste a lot less time, arguing with people who disagree with our stance on like against genocide in Palestine, because we have flown a Palestinian flag in the shop for many years. And so because we're not having to firefight all the time each opinion with people who disagree with us on profound levels, we're able to have a lot more nuanced conversations about bits and pieces of like, well, how do we build that better? Or what do we do about that? Which is a far more interesting way of spending the day. So I think, it's making us like build the next thing better. We started a romance festival, which, other radical bookshops are like, really? And it's like, yeah, because joy and pleasure are radical. Like, what's the point in building this better world if we don't get to be like happy and in love in it? So I think, I take myself less seriously. We're a little bit more settled into the bones of like, we're going to get it wrong, but people know what we're about. So they'll call us in constructive ways. And then we get to like rethink or explain ourselves. So I think it's more fun than it was when it felt like everything was a battle. And that makes the feel of the shop, I think, a little different.
I love that.
God, that's amazing. Speaking of the shop, I have one more shop question before we ask you 2 sillier questions and then let you go. I saw that you have a pay it forward program, and I looked at it a little bit about what it was on your site, and it seems amazing. I've never seen that at another store, and I was just curious if you could, for our listeners, explain what it is and how it works.
So, I mean, pay it forward has existed in so many fields in so many ways. We all understand sort of the principle. Mm-hmm. Somebody who puts money in the tin and somebody who doesn't gets to take money out of the tin. Like, it's a very basic level of collectivism. And we thought, nobody gets what a difference a book can make than like other book people. Like, if you're a book person, that lifeline that is like the book that you needed in that moment for whatever reason, other book people get it. And so we're just the conduit for one book person to get money to a broke book person to buy the books that they want. And so we do that in a few different ways. We've got like an online version of it so people can literally just put money in the pot. And then we have like tags in the shop where people will be like, I will leave £5 to spend on a queer writer, or £5 to read about nature, or, like, have a nice day. Here's a drawing of a duck and £10. One can pick them off the wall and use them. And it's basically a voucher that's just sitting there waiting for the person who wants it. We don't ask any questions. You just get to use it. And it's the same on the website. There's a code on the website. So if you need to use it, and we really haven't seen that like be used in anything but like the most wholesome way. And people use it on lots of different things. The other thing is, if you're broke, you don't go shopping. So broke people don't go into shops, especially families and families with children. Kids pick up books and then you have to explain why you can't give them that book. So with that, we take Pay It Forward out into the world. So we work with a few organizations that provide books to families who don't have books at home. And they basically use some of the pay it forward money, and we sell the books at cost, and they get to pick their books and get them delivered. So it's kind of, but it's, it's not charity. It's not us doing it. It's like people looking out for each other. Sometimes it's like 50p. People like round up the end of their bill. And I think with the cost of living crisis, I don't know what it's like in the States, but like here, books that were $8.99 are now $10.99. Books that were $12.99 are now $14.99. And if you were just able to afford the $12.99 book, suddenly you can't. Having £2 shaved off your bill suddenly makes it accessible again. So it's nobody saying you should be reading this book. I'm going to give you this book that I love, regardless of what you want. It's just like, hey, you want books? I've got some money. Let me help you out. And lots of other bookstores are doing it as well now. And I think, you'll find like versions of it where people donate different books or do them through different organizations. And there's like Pages of Hackney in London now have it category as books in Glasgow. And I mean, it's an idea that we picked up from a coffee shop. Like I saw, like there was a local coffee shop to us that used to do it. Mostly for rough sleepers, but it was just like tags for coffee. So you could buy your coffee and stick a tag for someone else, and then anyone else could come up and pay for it using that. And I was like, oh, coffee people get coffee people. Book people will get book people.
Yep.
I'm obsessed with this. I've never seen that at any stores near me. I feel like you should write like a how-to guide and then like send it to every bookstore. Like
definitely. I've forgotten my brain just now. There is a bookshop in the US. It's a queer bookshop somewhere in Middle America that was doing it. And we had during COVID, when our regulars ended up on the wrong side of the Atlantic, we were providing pay it forward for each other and like passing stuff forward. So like there are some places in the States doing it, and like I think people come up with their own little version that works for them. And it, like, for us as a business, it's not like, for us it's cash flow, like because it means that people who have money will spend more, and then that means that the people who are broke still get books with that money. So everyone should have a pay it forward wall.
I agree.
Agreed.
I'm going to go down to my bookstore and be like, I heard about this thing. Listen to my podcast.
Well, we have a couple of sillier questions for you now. We call this our lightning round, and we're going to ask you 2 questions, and they shouldn't be things that require much thought. Okay. And I think Craig has the first one.
Yes. What book genre do you think gets the least love but deserves more?
I mean, it's in bookshops, romance. I think romance does terrifically well in virtual spaces and in ebooks and audiobooks. Bookshops don't take it seriously enough. More romance sections in bookshops to show that it's the great genre that it is, and translated fiction also.
Yeah.
It's funny how many like romance specific bookshops are opening. There's one opening here in Boston in September. I saw they just signed up for Libro, which is how I found out about it.
It's a great hack for new bookshops.
Oh, totally. What is the most creative excuse you've ever received for someone wanting to return a book?
I can't remember the last time someone returned a book.
That's amazing.
Or did anything interesting. You said Yeah, no, sorry. I'm screwing up your lightning round.
No, that's okay.
I don't, maybe it's because of who they're buying from. I mean, we had one person try and return books from a different bookshop with like the stick bookshop on the front. And it was clearly someone who'd never been into the shop before. And it was like, you're in the wrong place. And
that's so funny.
Yeah. But fortunately a rarity.
That's very fortunate fantastic. For sure. That's awesome.
I do customer support with Libro, and it's oddly a hard part of my job when people want to return books, especially when it's something that I really loved. When someone's like, I want to return one last stop. I'm like, no, give it another try. Like, come on.
What excuse? What is the like? They didn't like it.
The top two I get are people just they're like, the story is not for me. But interestingly, in the world of audiobooks, the number one excuse is I can't handle this narrator's voice. Like it's just of a like timbre or a cadence that like I personally cannot continue forward with. And I'm like, that I get it. That makes sense. So it really speaks to how important that casting decision is.
Oh, completely. I recently listened to the audiobook of something. I was chairing an event and it's like there were several books in the series and I was like, oh God, this is terrible. And then I ended up, they finally sent me the print books and it took me a while to like erase the book voice from and then the book was incredible. But I was like, oh, I think if I just stuck with the audio, I probably would have thought it was terrible.
I'm glad you didn't say the name of the book. I was like, some narrator is about to get thrown under the Lighthouse bus.
And I get, the thing is, it's like you love one reader and then you send it to someone and they hate it. Like it's such a, I think there's a lot of British readers that are like, why are so many books in an American accent or a very particular East Coast American accent or like.
I resent that.
But it's like, what's universal blanket American accent that, yes.
Before we let you go, I'm sure this question won't surprise you, but we were wondering if you have a book recommendation for us and our listeners, like something that you've read recently or enjoy or just love to hand sell.
So there's one book that I know doesn't have an audiobook yet, but I'm hoping that if audio listeners demand it, that they will, that they shall receive. There's an amazing book called Namesake, Essays on a Warrior Woman by a writer called Nuseibeh. And she is a Palestinian British writer who's written a collection of essays about like Arab feminism, what it is to be like what it is to be in these liminal spaces where you're not quite Arab enough, you're not quite what is Islamophobia look like in today? What is the lived experience of a young woman growing up in East Jerusalem who will pass as white in one moment and be very much an Arab, a Palestinian another moment. And it's so full of humor and nuance and it's so clever. But it also deals with like disability, all of those different bits of like feminist discourse, bodies, fat, food, family, brothers, and woven through it is like the history of her, one of her ancestors, who was one of the acolytes of the Prophet Muhammad. And it's sort of, she's got this warrior woman who fought in battles. And then there's her, this like deeply anxious, troubled person being like, I'm the warrior and she is the warrior, and how to wear that circle. And it's beautiful for anyone to read. But I feel like in this moment, we should be reading more Palestinian feminists, and Nuseibeh is brilliant.
I can't wait. I'm going to go get that today.
Yeah. Does Libro, do you guys get to go to publishers and be like, there should be an audiobook of this?
We have really close relationships with the publishers and we definitely provide feedback, but we are unfortunately not part of the actual creation of the audiobook itself process. But we do have an outlet to speak. So
we need to form an audiobook lobby.
Well, I just think more of them in the world. But yeah, maybe this is just me summoning it into existence. Please, world, make an book of Namesake.
We will all cross our fingers. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure you have a billion things to do and shelve, and I think you said you had shipments coming in earlier, so we really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for everything that Libro is doing to support bookshops, to drag bookshops kicking and streaming into the 21st century, where we have solutions and have books in different forms. I think it's really special, and for us and the kind of bookshop that we are, it's really great to find other businesses and people who are doing the good things where they are. So thanks to Libro.
Thank you, Mairi.
Thank you, and thank you for all your shop's doing, obviously. It was really great to hear about.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.